Throughout history, the dietary laws found in the Bible have intrigued and even puzzled readers. Why did God forbid certain foods to the people of Israel? What was the purpose behind these restrictions? Were they merely practical health guidelines, or did they carry a deeper spiritual significance? Today we'll dive into the story behind these prohibitions, exploring the cultural and spiritual context in which they were given. We'll uncover how these rules reflect not only God's holiness but also His care for His people. Prepare to discover secrets that few understand about the forbidden foods in the Bible. What does the Bible say about clean and unclean foods? The first mention of specific foods being labeled as clean or unclean appears in Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. In these passages, God provides a detailed list of animals that the Israelites could and could not eat. Among the permitted animals were those that chew the cud and have cloven hooves, such as cattle and goats. Prohibited animals included pigs, rabbits, and camels. The criteria for determining the purity of food also applied to birds, fish, and even insects. For example, fish had to have fins and scales, excluding creatures like eels and shellfish. Birds of prey, such as eagles and ravens, were considered unclean. These laws were not merely general suggestions, but direct commands from God, often reinforced with the statement, "Be holy, for I am holy," Leviticus chapter 11, verse 44. But why this emphasis on food? What was God teaching His people through these restrictions? The historical and cultural context of dietary laws. To understand the dietary restrictions, it's essential to consider the context in which they were given. The Israelites were in a formative period as a nation, emerging from slavery in Egypt and learning to live as God's chosen people. The dietary laws set them apart from the surrounding cultures, many of which practiced eating habits tied to pagan rituals. For instance, neighboring religions often used unclean animals in their sacrifices to false gods. By forbidding these foods, God was separating His people from these practices and reinforcing His holiness. Eating, an everyday activity, became an act of obedience and spiritual distinction. Additionally, these dietary laws created a collective identity for the Israelites. They united them as a unique people with customs that distinguished them from the nations around them. Every meal served as a reminder that they were set apart for a special purpose. The spiritual significance of dietary restrictions. Beyond practical or cultural reasons, the dietary restrictions carried profound spiritual meaning. They taught the Israelites to discern between the holy and the common, the clean and the unclean. This lesson extended far beyond food. It reflected a spiritual reality. By observing these restrictions, the people learned the importance of obeying God in every aspect of life, even in something as seemingly mundane as eating. Holiness wasn't limited to worship in the temple, it extended to everyday decisions. Eating permitted foods was a way to honor God and acknowledge His authority. There was also a symbolic element to these laws. Animals like pigs, which were forbidden, often lived in environments considered dirty and fed on scraps, symbolizing spiritual impurity. Permitted animals, such as sheep and oxen, had positive associations, often used in sacrifices and representing purity. Dietary laws and health. While the spiritual significance is central, many scholars point out that these laws also had a positive impact on the Israelites' health. Some of the forbidden foods, such as pork, are more prone to carry diseases if not properly prepared. Others, like shellfish, can accumulate toxins. The dietary laws can be seen as a way for God to protect His people in a time when modern hygiene and refrigeration techniques didn't exist. By following these rules, the Israelites avoided illnesses and strengthened their health, even if they didn't fully understand the scientific reasons. Jesus and the dietary laws. In the New Testament, the issue of dietary laws takes on a new meaning. In Mark chapter 7, verse 19, Jesus declares, "Nothing that enters a man from the outside can defile him, but what comes out of him defiles him." This statement marked a radical shift in the understanding of dietary laws. Jesus was teaching that true purity is not determined by what we eat, but by the state of our hearts. This change is reaffirmed in Acts chapter 10, where Peter has a vision of a sheet descending from heaven containing all kinds of animals. God says to Peter, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." Acts chapter 10, verse 15. This event symbolized the inclusion of Gentiles into the new covenant, but also marked the end of dietary restrictions for Christians. However, this shift doesn't mean that the Old Testament dietary laws were pointless. They served their purpose of teaching holiness, obedience, and dependence on God, paving the way for the fullness of revelation in Christ. Dietary laws in our lives today. Although Christians are no longer obligated to follow the dietary restrictions of the Old Testament, the spiritual lessons they teach remain relevant. Just as the Israelites were called to live in a way that reflected God's holiness, we too are called to live holy lives. The dietary laws also remind us that every decision we make, no matter how small, can be a way to honor God. Whether in our eating habits, our words, or our actions, we are called to live for His glory. Finally, the transition of dietary laws in the New Testament reminds us that God is not only concerned with external rules, but with the condition of our hearts. Christ's invitation is for complete transformation, going beyond what we eat to who we are. Reflection and invitation. The story of dietary restrictions in the Bible is much more than a list of rules. It is a reflection of God's love and care for His people. These laws highlight God's holiness, His desire for communion with us, and His provision in every aspect of life. Have you ever thought about how your daily choices reflect your faith? Just as the dietary laws were a constant reminder for the Israelites, we are called to live in ways that demonstrate our commitment to God. If this topic sparked your curiosity and brought new insights into the Bible, subscribe to our channel for more reflections and stories that strengthen faith. May God bless you on your spiritual journey and help you live each day in obedience and gratitude.